We are taking a quick break. We're kind of in between series right now. We're going to be working through Nehemiah here in about a week, but I wanted to take a step back and talk about discipleship, because discipleship is what we do here at Cornerstone. And when we consider discipleship, we consider the path of a disciple. Now, for the disciples, if you guys remember last week, Mark chapter 1, Jesus calls them, just walks up to a few random guys. Peter's one of them, and says, "Follow me." So Peter just drops his net right there and goes and follows Jesus and goes on this wild and crazy and at times difficult journey of discipleship. But then Jesus, at least in the eyes of Peter, failed. He failed. He went up on that cross and he died. And for Peter and for the disciples, it was game over. And I want to talk about why we give up. Seth Godin is someone I often listen to. I listen to a number of his podcasts, and then I read some of his books. He's really passionate about helping businesses and helping individuals figure out how they can be the best that they are called to be. And we have a person like Peter who was called to something and he failed. So Seth Godin talks about the dip. So I want to talk about the dip. What he says is, for many organizations and for many individuals, we decide that we're going to go do a thing. Whatever it is. It could be we're going to start a family, we're going to start our own business, we're going to take a new job. Whatever the thing is, we're going. And we feel like we are called to the thing. It's everything. And we have changed and resorted our life to go do whatever the thing is. And so Seth points out, he says, what you usually experience in the beginning is this. Things are going well, things are going up, you're overcoming a number of obstacles that you didn't think you could overcome. If you've accepted Jesus Christ and you decided to follow him, Jesus says to you, hey, I'm going to call you to something. It's going to be great, it's going to be amazing, and it's going to change everything. And you say, Jesus, okay, I will follow you. Wherever you want to take me, I will follow you. And along the way, Jesus says, I want you to do this, and so you do it. Jesus says, I want you to do this, and so you do it. And life gets better. And in the calling, you feel like your life is rising and going up and up and up and up. But then Seth Godin talks about the dip. A lot of organizations, a lot of individuals experience something like this. And this is where they stop. Maybe some of you guys have stopped here. Whatever it is. Everything from simple as just being in the Word and praying, to committing yourself to the work that's in front of you, to raising your children to being a spiritual leader. Whatever it is, you've kind of stopped. You've given up because you hit a wall and you don't know how to get past it. So you hit this dip. But then what Seth Godin points out is, so many times in life, we stop here and we don't bother to move on. But those who decide to push through and to move on, what ends up happening is something like this. That we rise and rise, and life is exciting, our faith is exciting, and whatever we're called to by Jesus is exciting, but we hit this dip and we go down and we give up. But instead of giving up, if we could just hold on, something greater is about to happen. And I wonder for you what this is. I'm not really a sports fan. I try. I really do try. So I moved to Dallas. I'm going to try out this football thing that everyone keeps talking about. And there's this team, and it's the Cowboys, and I guess they're kind of popular. And there's this player, Tony Romo. Everyone likes him. So I'm going to put my heart and life into Tony Romo. 5 years later, this is where I was. But then the Lord Jesus Christ saw fit to take me out of Dallas and take me to a new land, Chicago area. And I thought, okay, I have a new team I can really believe in. The Bears. I am here for the Bears. It took me 2 weeks, guys. And it was not a dip. It was a crash and burn. No offense, but y'all know what I'm talking about. What would this be for you right here? What's the crash and burn? What's the I've given up? What's the I am tired of? In fact, guys, just call it out. Here, I'll throw one out. And you don't have to confess on your own, just in general. But just call it out. Maybe it's something like, I have given up on, Jesus has called me to get an education, but I've given up on school, and I've just said, that's not for me. What else, guys? What else do people give up on? Marriages? Anyone there? Again, you don't have to tell me right now. But marriages. I tried. I gave my 5, 10, 15 years. It's not working. I'm moving on. What else, guys? School. Jobs. Either you quit a job every 2 to 3 years because you're done with that job and you go into another job and you hit another dip and you give up over and over again, or you do work that job, but your heart isn't in it anymore. What else, guys? What else would you put on that list? Your government. The government. I would argue that any one of these, as a disciple, Jesus says, I have called you to get an education. And actually, Jesus called me specifically at one point in my life to get an education. And I bailed out a couple of times. I was done. At times, Jesus calls us as part of disciples to love the one that we are with, to marry and to love that one. Jesus calls us in our jobs to give ourselves over with passion and with drive. Jesus calls us over and over, and we see in the Bible, we saw in the book of Romans, to serve our government and to not always fight and to resist when it is right and when they do not counter what God's word tells us. Jesus tells us over and over and over again, I've called you to a thing, don't give up. But often what we do is we tend to give up. I know the question for me at this point is, well, why should I push through? Why, Jesus? I've tried and tried and tried and tried again. The disciples are there and they won it all and they lost it all. Peter started out as a fisherman, and Jesus said, essentially, put down your nets, come and follow me. And Peter follows him, and follows him to failure. And so what we see in John chapter 21, which we're going to review today, we see in John chapter 21, where does Jesus find Peter and the disciples again? Fishing. Why are they fishing? Because they gave up. And for Peter, there's going to be this sense of, well, why should I believe again? Jesus has died. He's risen from the dead. He's standing right there. But that doesn't automatically mean they should risk their life and give their all again because they did it the first time and it didn't work out. Why should they do it again? I'm going to spoil the entire message, and I'm going to tell you what the answer is. For the love of Jesus. Amen. I can give you 100 different reasons, and the world gives you 100 different reasons why you should never give up. But I'm going to tell you the only reason when Jesus calls you to whatever he calls you to as his disciple, the only reason John chapter 21 will tell us to never give up is this: for the love of Jesus. That's all that matters. So turn with me to John chapter 21, verse 15. So what we saw earlier in that chapter is that Jesus comes and he finds the disciples and he sees that they're fishing and they have an exchange. They realize this is Jesus, the one we saw die on the cross, but now he's walking, living and breathing. And so they sit down and they have some food and they eat. And it says, and when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? So the way he asks this question is not just that, do you love me? He says, do you love me more than anyone else? Compared to anyone else. I want you to consider who's in your life, not only the disciples, but your mother and your father and your wife and your countrymen and whoever. He said, compared to them, where do I rank? Am I less or more in your eyes? Do you love me more than all of them? This is a kind of comparative question. To me, the answer is Well, yeah. I'm not going to answer for Peter here, but for myself as well, why wouldn't you love Jesus more than anyone else literally on the planet and all of the universe? Think about it. Think about the kind of persons we tend to love, all right? The kind of person that we tend to love is someone that sacrifices for us. Someone says, you know what, that project that you've been working on, I've had a really busy weekend, but I'm going to drop in and help you finish that. You're building your fence, or you're doing some landscaping. I'm going to spend the next 5-6 hours of my weekend to help you do that. There's a moment of, you know what, I kind of like this guy. So sacrifice. So someone sacrifices for you, like, I could sign up for that. Someone who never leaves you is always there no matter what. No matter what you're going through, no matter what you're dealing with, no matter how terrible you treat everyone, they are always right next to you. And every once in a while you can think of maybe your spouse or a family member who's always there, and you can't help but to love that kind of a person who will never leave your side. So someone that sacrifices and someone that never abandons you. How about someone that doesn't judge you? Of course, they know that you're not perfect. You make mistakes, and you drop the ball. But they don't look for every single opportunity to tell you and remind you of that. If you ever have that kind of a person in your life, you like that person. You love that person. And I want you to take that kind of person up to the nth degree, and you have the person of Jesus. So if Jesus has sacrificed everything, will never abandon you, and does not judge you, he is literally the best person in all of the universe who was and is and will be. How can you not love a person like Jesus? He's just great. He's just great. And so the answer to me, and I don't want to put the words into Peter's mouth, but the answer is, well, of course, of course, I love you. So Peter says, you know that I love you. And Jesus says, feed my lambs. Jesus is saying is, I've done everything for you. Now I'm about to leave. Now I'm about to leave this planet, Peter. And I've got to go back to my Father. And I've given you everything. But now here are these people that I've loved and I've taken care of and I have healed and I have begun to raise up. You see those people over there, Peter? Yeah. If you love me, I who have sacrificed, who have never abandoned you, will never leave you. If you love me, then you'll love them. Now, this sounds a little manipulative, right? I mean, isn't the idea with love is if someone loves you, you shouldn't have to prove yourself. But I think if we think about it in a particular context, it'll make a lot of sense. One of these days, my dad or my stepmom is going to pass away. And I imagine if my dad is the first to go, that I'm in the room with him. And I'm at his bedside. And my stepmom is over there. And he kind of pulls me aside and says, son, you love me, right? Yeah, Dad, of course I love you. You see that woman over there? She's everything to me. I love her with all my heart, but I will not be here for her. Will you take care of her? Of course I would. You are everything to me, Dad, so I will do everything I can to take care of her. So in this sense of love, it makes sense. And what he essentially saying is the reason that I want you to continue to take on this call in your life, Peter, to feed my sheep is because I loved you with everything I got. Why do we not give up? For the love of Jesus. For the love of Jesus. So we continue on, and Jesus asks again. Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. I'm going to look at verse 16 really quick because it's not quite right. It says, again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? But actually, that's not what Jesus said the first time. The first time Jesus said, Simon, do you love me more than these? The second time it just says, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Period. In a sense, what's going on here is it's like, okay, I've asked you if you love me more than these, but forget about these. Forget about everyone in the universe. Forget about everyone else. If it's just you and me in a room and we are just looking at each other without any other outside influences, and I'm looking at you and you're looking at me, do you just love me here in front of you? Forget about the religion, forget about the church meetings, forget about the Bible studies, forget about everything else that that times could be window dressing. Just you, if it was just you and me, do you love me? And I get this sense with the way that this question is working is husband and wife who are empty nesters. You can imagine if you have kids and for 20, 30 years and your entire life has been devoted to those children and you almost lose your identity as two people that love each other. But now that they're gone and you sit in a room and it's you and it's the other person and you're just wondering, do I still love you? My whole life has been built around you and me raising these kids, but now these kids are no longer here, so now it's just you and me, and that's our only identity. Do I still love you without the children in the room? There's no window dressing, there's nothing else but just you and me. What he is saying in my mind, and what he is asking Peter in my mind is, do you have that devotion to give your all to me the way you did when I first met you? It's like a husband and wife, to give your all to the other person the way when they first met each other. Michael Joyce's memory and some of his speech have been snatched by Alzheimer's. The disease is so advanced that he forgot he was married to his wife of 38 years. But he is in love with her, and he is also an honorable man. So he proposed to her on a recent morning. She said yes. You don't say, oh, we're already married, Linda Joyce, 64, told the New Zealand news site Stuff. So I said, of course I will, thinking he might not remember. But the next morning, Michael Joyce, 68, woke up and asked her, so when are we doing this? According to Stuff, here's how Linda invited her friends and community to their second wedding. My adored hubby of 38 years suffers from Alzheimer's. 2 nights ago, out of the blue, with tear-filled eyes, he asked me to marry him. Michael had clearly forgotten we were already married, but I absolutely went along with him and said I would be delighted to be his wife. In spite of his confused mind, he obviously knows and feels this is something he really wants to do. To Michael, it will be our wedding ceremony, and to our friends and myself, a truly precious, memorable occasion. On their wedding morning, Linda Joyce said she wasn't sure he would remember, but he woke up and told his betrothed, today's the day. The beaming couple, originally from Scotland, exchanged vows at a scenic lake near their home as friends looked on. There's been a lot of sadness and a lot of frustration, Linda Joyce said. And despite all the fogginess, today has been pure joy. And I can imagine for Linda Joyce and what everyone was experiencing was that first kind of love. That love that's there when you were first engaged and when you just got married. And it's that kind of devotion of, I will be there for you through it all. And Jesus is saying, are you so devoted to me that you would sacrifice yourself in the way that you were ready to sacrifice yourself in Mark chapter 1? Do you actually love me? And the apostle Peter, the disciple Peter, at this point responds and says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, take care of my sheep. What's really interesting is, and I haven't pointed this out until this second time, is that the words that are being used here. When Jesus first asked Peter, do you love me? He uses the Greek word agape. Agape means sacrificial love. Yeah, it's the first time. Do you sacrificially love me? Peter's response is, yes, I phileo you, or yes, I love you, but it just means I love you like family. So he says, do you sacrificially love me? I love you like family. The second time it's asked, Jesus says, do you sacrificially love me? And Peter says, I love you like family. What Jesus is getting at is, Peter, I am asking you, do I have everything from you? And Peter can only go so far as to say, I love you like a brother, but not my whole life. And the question comes back to all of us. When Jesus says, do you sacrificially love me? What's our response? Because I will tell you, if the response is only like a brother, like family, it's good for family reunions, then you will never return to the calling that Jesus has in your life. But when your response is, no, I sacrificially love you, then that is the thing that will push you forward, and you will continue to rise and embrace the thing that Jesus has for you. Verse 17, the third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. And then he goes on to say, very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. What does that mean? It's a very strange response. What he's saying is essentially, when you're younger, you're independent. But when you're older, people are going to force you to do things you don't want to do. How is that related to this whole love Jesus, do you love me thing? Well, John goes on to explain here in the gospel. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. The reason he is asking over and over and over again, you want to know a good reason to get back into the fight? It's out of love for me. But if you love me, I need to prepare you for this. You will probably have to give it all away. And if you try to get back into the fight without a love for me first, you won't make it. It is only the love for Jesus that will see us through. If you know something about me, you know that I like my relationships simple. I don't like them very complicated. I like them pretty straightforward. I really don't like a lot of games. I really don't like a lot of politicking. I really don't like having to, push. I don't like a lot of masks and have to read in between the lines and all that stuff. I am a simple man with simple needs. I married Jenny for a reason, because if you know her, she's beautiful and lovely, and she says what she believes. And I love that about her. I'm a simple man with simple needs. So God told me a joke. He said, hey, I want you to go be a pastor. I'm going to drop you into the middle of community where people are not simple, because we're not simple. And I'm going to drop you into the middle of that. And I can't tell you time and time again how many times I get stuck right here. And it is only recently in the last couple of months where I realized why I was stuck. Because I did take on the calling. I did do what God asked me to do. But I thought the fuel that got me through all of it was grit and hard work. That's what I tend to lean on. But it's not true. The only thing that will get you to whatever God has called you is the love of Jesus. If you guys have experienced in your spiritual walk that it's just like, go up a little bit and then goes down, you go up a little bit, it goes down, you do all that thing. Have you considered for one moment that you might be in it for the wrong reason? We like the window dressing. We like the religion. It makes us feel comfortable. We like how the Bible sounds. We like it when someone prays for us. It's all good stuff, all good stuff. But the fire that must burn in your soul that will continue to keep you going to embrace the calling on your life is none of that stuff. It is the love of Jesus. It's the love of Jesus. And if you have that, you can get through anything. And that's why Jesus is explaining to Peter, if you truly love me, then in the future, you're going to have to make the greatest sacrifice, but you will be able to get through it because of your love for me. I want to end on this. I often think about early Christians and all the persecution they experienced, and often ask myself, is this something I could get through? Is this something I would have the heart to get through? So I've been reading this book, The Patient Ferment of the Early Church, and it's a number of accounts of early Christians who would sacrifice themselves for the love of Jesus. And so there's a story talking about a number of Christians who were thrown into the gladiatorial games. It says, but soon the crowd's mood shifted again. When Perpetua, Felicitas were stripped naked, and the provoked cow tossed them, the crowd recoiled in horror. These two women were suffering. Perpetua, delicate and young, and Felicitas clearly had just given birth. So at the crowd's demand, the two women were brought back and dressed. When the men suffered, the crowd's response was less sympathetic. When the catechist Satyrus bled profusely after an attack by a leopard, the crowd responded with the rhythmic chant, Salum lotum, Salum lotum, had a great bath, had a great bath. What does that mean? This leopard starts ripping into this individual and there's blood coming everywhere and he's saying, had a great bath, had a great bath. At the very end, after most of the Christians had been seriously wounded by the animals, the crowd's interest was clearly still lively, for they asked that all the Christians be brought to a central spot where they could see clearly as the gladiator's sword finished them off. They saw the executions, but they also saw the Christians mustering the strength of body and will to stand up, gather themselves as a group in a specified spot, and give a final embodied witness. These disparate people, women and men, slave and free, poor and advantaged, kissed each other so that they might bring their martyrdom to completion with a kiss of peace. Exhausted and in pain, though they were, and extremists, the prisoners did reflexively, virtually on autopilot, what they had been habituated to do in their services of worship. They exchanged the kiss of peace, embodying a love that transcended social barriers. But what love did they embody? It was the love for Jesus. Guys, I would love to sell you a game. How to get involved in your Christian faith. And, if you do this, you're going to get the big house. If you do this, everything's going to work out right. And if you do this, you're going to always feel good about who you are. I love to play that game, and it's kind of an exchange for service. You'll always feel happy and pretty and better if you give yourself over to your calling. But guys, it's just a game. The truth is when you give yourself over to your calling and you're willing to stand back up and jump back in again, it will be hard and at times bloody and at times you want to give up. But I will tell you, you will get through it for the love of Jesus. But more than anything else, at the end of your life, much like this, they went out in peace and for the love of Jesus. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we truly want. And that's why we're here. And that's why we accepted Christ as our personal Lord and Savior.